Right after giving birth to 6 puppies, Daisy, gentle as can be, vanished into a cold, rain-soaked night. Mara ran into the yard with her heart pounding because a new mother dog doesn't leave her babies unless something is terribly wrong. Then Daisy came back, carrying what looked like a muddy little kitten. But under the porch light, Mara froze. It wasn't a house cat at all. It was a wild bobcat cub with a tight snare mark pressed into its fur. In that single moment, a miracle began. And so did the fight that would bring the law, the neighbors, and the dark woods straight to their door. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The house had been quiet in the way a home gets after a long day of worry. Quiet, but never truly still. Mara sat on the edge of the laundry room floor, with her back against the dryer, listening to the soft, milky squeaks of 6 newborn puppies tucked under a heat lamp. The air smelled like clean towels, warm fur, and that faint, sweet scent that comes right after birth. Daisy, usually a laid-back, gentle soul, lay curled around them like a living blanket, her sides rising and falling in slow, steady waves. Outside, winter rain tapped the windows in thin, impatient fingers. The wind pushed at the gutters and made the porch light tremble, casting pale yellow stripes across the mudroom door. Ethan stood by the kitchen counter with a mug of decaf, watching Mara the way a man watches someone doing sacred work. They'd both agreed on one thing when Daisy's labor began. If anything went wrong, they wouldn't hesitate. Emergency vet, animal hospital, whatever it took. Mara had even looked up her pet insurance policy earlier, more out of habit than fear, the way you double-check the lock before bed. Then Daisy lifted her head. It wasn't the normal sleepy check a mother dog gives her pups. Her ears went forward, her eyes sharpened, fixed on something beyond the walls. She stood, careful not to step on a tiny paw, and walked to the back door like she had heard her name called from the trees. "Daisy?" Mara whispered, already moving. Before Mara could latch the baby gate, Daisy slipped past with a smoothness that didn't fit her tired body. The door opened on a breath of cold air and the smell of wet pine. Daisy vanished into the darkness. Mara froze for half a heartbeat. Then the panic hit like a dropped plate. Sharp, loud, immediate. A new mother dog didn't wander off in a storm, not without a reason. Mara grabbed a flashlight, its beam slicing through the rain, and Ethan pulled on his boots so fast the laces slapped the floor. The yard was a watercolor mess. Black soil, silver rain, the fence line bending in the wind. Somewhere out past the trees, an owl called once, low and hollow, and the sound made Mara's skin prickle. "Daisy!" Ethan shouted. The name flew out and got swallowed by the rain. Minutes stretched, 10, maybe more. Mara's heart beat hard enough she could feel it in her throat. She pictured a slipped fence board, a startled coyote, a wrong step near the creek. Her mind, trained by years of veterinary work, raced through worst-case scenarios the way it always did. It wasn't just fear, it was responsibility. She kept thinking about homeowners insurance the way people do when they don't want to think about blood or loss, as if paperwork could stand between a family and disaster. Then, at the far edge of the porch light, something moved. Daisy came back low to the ground, rain streaming off her coat in dark ribbons. She wasn't empty-mouthed. She was carrying something small, bundled tight between her jaws, with a care so precise it looked rehearsed. Mara stepped forward, and the flashlight beam landed on it. At first, it seemed like a kitten, muddy, shivering, barely bigger than a loaf of bread. But the ears were wrong. The legs were too long. The face held a wildness that didn't belong in a laundry room beside a heat lamp. The little creature blinked, and its eyes caught the light like glass. A bobcat cub. Mara's breath stopped. Ethan swore under his breath, not from anger, but from shock so deep it needed a sound. Daisy walked straight to Mara, set the cub down, and stood over it like a shield. Her body trembled, not with fear, but with urgency. She nudged it once, firm, then looked at Mara with a gaze that felt like a plea. Mara crouched slowly. The cub's fur was cold and slick. A thin, sharp smell clung to it, metal and old rust, like wet wire left in the woods too long. When Mara saw the small cut on its leg and the faint line pressed into the fur, her stomach turned. Not a scratch from a branch, something tighter, something made by human hands. In the storm-lit doorway, with 6 newborn puppies crying behind her and a wild cub shivering at her feet, Mara realized this night wasn't just strange. It was going to change everything. Mara carried the cub inside the way you carry something breakable you never asked for, hands steady, stomach spinning. Rainwater dripped off Daisy's coat onto the kitchen tile in dark commas. The puppy's thin cries rose and fell behind the baby gate like a tiny choir that didn't know the world had just changed. Under the brighter light, the cub looked even smaller. Its ribs moved in shallow, quick pulls, and its fur, mottled brown and gray, clung to its body like damp wool. When Mara touched its paw, the skin felt wrong, too cold, too slack. She'd seen hypothermia in strays and barn cats, seen it in animals that came in after long nights on highways. This was the same stillness, the same quiet surrender. "Heat first," she said, mostly to herself. Her voice sounded too loud in the warm house. Ethan slid a towel from the dryer, fresh, hot, smelling of cotton and detergent, and Mara wrapped the cub like a burrito, leaving its nose free. She set a heating pad on low beneath a blanket, checked it the way she always checked anything that could burn, then laid the cub down. Daisy pressed in, immediately, hovering so close Mara could feel the dog's breath on her wrist, warm, milky, urgent. "Easy," Mara whispered. "I'm helping." Daisy's eyes didn't leave the cub. A low sound rolled in her chest, not a growl meant to bite, but the warning of a mother who had already decided what this creature was, hers to protect. Mara reached for her vet kit from the mudroom cabinet. The familiar snap of the latch grounded her. Thermometer, saline, syringe, gauze. The tools made soft clicks on the countertop, small, orderly sounds against the storm. She listened to the cub's breathing and counted in her head, then touched the gums, pale, tacky, dehydrated, shocky. Ethan held the flashlight while Mara examined the leg. The cut was narrow, angry red against wet fur, and just above it was a faint line pressed into the coat like something had cinched down hard and then released. The metallic smell she'd noticed at the door was stronger now, sharp as a penny on the tongue. "A wire," Ethan murmured. Mara nodded, careful not to let her face show too much. People liked to believe the woods were pure and untouched. She'd patched enough animals to know better. She warmed a bit of electrolyte solution and offered it in tiny drops at the edge of the cub's mouth. At first, nothing. Then a weak swallow. Another. The smallest victory, but it made Mara's eyes sting. Daisy leaned closer and let out a soft whine, a sound that felt like a prayer. Mara glanced toward the puppies, then back to the cub. If this went sideways, she'd have to drive through the rain to an emergency vet or animal hospital, cost be damned. She thought of pet insurance again, absurdly, and then of how no policy covered this. No line item for wild bobcat found in your kitchen at midnight. Her phone buzzed. Lena's name lit the screen. Mara stepped into the hallway and answered in a hush. Lena's voice came through crisp and tired. "Mara, I'm calling because we got another report near the creek. Illegal snare lines." A fawn, 2 raccoons last month. If you saw anything strange tonight, you need to tell me." Mara looked back at the kitchen. Daisy stood like a statue over the cub, water still dripping from her belly fur. I have something," Mara said, and the words felt heavy. A bobcat cub, hurt, and Daisy brought it home. There was a pause on the line, the kind that makes your heart drop because you know what's coming next. "Listen," Lena said gently. "Keep it warm. Don't feed solid food. And whatever you do, document everything. Photos, times. If this is a snare injury, it matters." Mara ended the call and returned to the counter. The cub's eyelids fluttered. It released a thin, raspy sound, barely a mew, more like a breath trying to turn into a voice. Mara leaned in close, smelling wet earth and rust, and felt something inside her settle into place. This wasn't just rescue. This was a clock starting to tick by. Morning, the storm had moved on, but the world outside still looked rinsed and bruised. The yard was a churn of dark mud and bent grass, and the trees behind the fence dripped steadily as if they hadn't finished crying. Inside, the laundry room glowed with that soft amber light from the heat lamp, the kind that makes everything feel warmer than it is. Rowan lay wrapped in a clean blanket inside a plastic crate lined with towels. His breathing was steadier now, still quick, still shallow, but no longer fading. When Mara leaned close, she could hear it. A faint, stubborn rhythm, like someone tapping from the other side of a wall. His eyes opened now and then, not calm, not trusting, just searching. Mara built a barrier between the crate and Daisy's nesting area, a low pen with a soft mesh panel. It was the best compromise she could make. 6 puppies needed their mother without interruption. A wild bobcat needed distance, quiet, and safety. And Mara needed to know she wasn't risking something that would spiral into a 2 a.m. drive for emergency veterinary care all over again. Daisy disagreed with every careful rule. She paced once, slow and stiff, from giving birth, then lay down with her shoulder pressed against the mesh as if her body could become the bridge. Her breath warmed the air near Rowan's crate. She made a low, steady sound, almost a hum, that soothed the puppies and seemed to pull Rowan's attention like a string. When Rowan shifted, Daisy's ears flicked, and she nudged the mesh with her nose, gentle but certain. Ethan crouched beside Mara, his hands resting on his knees. "She's acting like he's one of them," he said quietly. Mara didn't answer right away. She watched Daisy the way she watched patients in recovery, looking for meaning in small movements. The puppies wriggled in a pale, squirming pile, their little bodies warm as fresh bread. One puppy, braver than the others, crawled toward the mesh. Daisy didn't snap. She simply placed one paw down, not hard, just firm enough to pause the tiny adventure. Then she turned her head and pressed her nose to the mesh again, right across from Rowan, as if granting permission. Rowan lifted his chin. He didn't hiss. He didn't lunge. He just stared, wide-eyed, and leaned forward an inch, drawn by Daisy's warmth and that mother's scent of milk and safety. The sight sent a strange shiver through Mara, sweet and unsettling at the same time. She stepped into the kitchen and called Dr. Calvin Reed, the wildlife behavior researcher Lena had mentioned. His voice came through calm and measured, like a man used to hard conversations. Mara explained the snare mark, the rescue, the way Rowan tracked Daisy with his eyes. There was a pause. Then Reed said, "Mara, what you're describing sounds like imprinting, not training, not taming. A psychological bond formed under stress and need." Mara's stomach tightened. She glanced at the folder on the counter where she'd started keeping notes and photos, the way Lena told her to. In her mind, other words lined up behind Reed's. Animal control, wildlife rehabilitation, liability coverage, even the kind of legal advice people seek when they're afraid one wrong step could cost them their home and their peace. She thought of homeowners insurance again, and how it never covers the kind of trouble that comes with a beating heart and wild eyes. Back in the laundry room, Rowan made a thin, breathy sound, and Daisy answered with that soft hum. The puppies slept on, unaware. Mara stood there, feeling the heat lamp on her face, hearing the faint squeaks and the quiet rain drip from the eaves outside, and she understood the truth forming in her chest. Rowan wasn't just recovering, he was choosing Daisy. 2 days after the storm, the sun came out thin and white, like it was still tired. The yard hadn't dried. Mud clung to the bottoms of Mara's shoes and made a soft sucking sound when she crossed the porch. Daisy stayed close to the laundry room doorway, torn between her puppies and the crate where Rowan rested. Every time Rowan shifted, Daisy's head lifted, ears pricked, as if she could feel his heartbeat through the walls. Mara had barely slept. The house smelled of warm milk, clean towels, and antiseptic. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was watchful. That afternoon, she noticed him for the first time. Gordon from next door, standing in his driveway a little too long with a rake in his hands, staring past the fence as if he owned the view. He was the kind of man who wore a clean cap even when he wasn't going anywhere. The kind who liked rules because rules made the world feel smaller. "Everything all right over there?" he called, voice friendly on top, sharp underneath. Mara forced a polite smile. "We're fine, just tired. New puppies." Gordon's gaze slid toward the mudroom window, toward the faint amber glow of the heat lamp inside. "Heard some odd noises the other night," he said. "Sounded like not a dog." Ethan stepped onto the porch beside Mara, his shoulders filling the doorway. "Storm does that," he said calmly. "Carries sounds." Gordon nodded like he accepted the answer, but his eyes kept working, counting and measuring. When he finally went back to his rake, Mara felt the air ease only slightly, like loosening a belt one notch. That night, the wind picked up again, not stormy, just restless. Around midnight, Daisy let out a low warning sound and stood staring toward the back fence. Her hackles lifted in a thin ridge. Mara's skin went cold. Ethan grabbed his jacket and stepped outside with a flashlight. The beam cut across the yard, bright and jittery. The fence line stood quiet, but the mud told a different story. Near the shed, there were fresh impressions. Boot marks pressed deep, heel and toe clear, as if someone had taken their time. Ethan crouched, his breath making small clouds in the cold. "Mara," he called, and his voice had that careful edge that meant trouble. By the trash bin, half buried in wet leaves, he found a short length of thin wire, dark with rust. Mara held it between gloved fingers and felt a familiar nausea. It wasn't proof of anything, not yet, but it felt like a message. Back inside, she checked their security camera app, the one she'd installed months ago for simple home security. The video showed a smear of motion near the fence, too far, too dark to identify, then nothing but the porch light flickering on damp air. Still, the sight made Mara's mind jump straight to words she didn't want to need. Liability insurance, wildlife removal, legal advice. She could already imagine an official at the door asking questions she didn't know how to answer. The next morning, the knock came, not on the front door, on the gate. Mara stepped outside and saw a bright sheet of paper taped to the post, edges fluttering in the breeze. Official letterhead, department seal. The kind of document that turns your mouth dry before you read a single word. Ethan read over her shoulder, silent. Daisy stood behind them in the doorway, watching with a stillness that felt almost human. The notice was brief and blunt. Possession of a wild bobcat was unlawful. They were instructed to surrender the animal for evaluation. They had 7 days. Mara stared at that number until it stopped looking like a word and started looking like a countdown. The paper on the gate might as well have been a weight on Mara's chest. 7 days. The words followed her through the house the way a sour smell follows smoke, into the laundry room, into the kitchen, into the quiet hours before dawn, when the refrigerator clicked and the floorboards sighed. Mara did what she always did when fear tried to take over. She got practical. She started a folder on the dining table with photos of Rowan's leg, timestamps, temperature notes, and a written log of every sip of electrolyte and every change in breathing. She printed screenshots from the security camera app, even the useless blurry ones, because sometimes in life you learn that proof isn't about what you know, it's about what you can show. Ethan watched her work in silence, rubbing the bridge of his nose, his coffee cooling beside him. Daisy made the week feel shorter than it was. She didn't understand 7 days, but she understood tension. Every time Mara opened her laptop, Daisy's ears flicked. Every time the phone rang, Daisy's head lifted. In the laundry room's amber glow, the puppies grew rounder and louder, their little squeaks turning into hungry yips. Rowan, too, was changing. He was stronger now, his eyes brighter, his movements quicker. But what unsettled Mara was how he tracked Daisy. If Daisy stepped out of sight, Rowan's body stiffened. A thin, rough sound rose in his throat, and he pawed at the crate door as if the whole world had narrowed to one gentle dog. Mara called the number on the notice and asked for a meeting. Her voice stayed calm, even when her palms were damp. She talked about the injury, the snare mark, the risk of shock, the need for a slow plan. The man on the phone wasn't cruel, but he was careful, like someone trained to keep feelings out of paperwork. He repeated the rules and suggested Rowan be transferred to a licensed wildlife rehabilitation facility. That same afternoon, another call came, this one from a nearby center that introduced itself in a cheerful tone and immediately asked about transport. They spoke in smooth phrases about protocol and standard intake, and Mara heard what they didn't say. Once Rowan left, she might never see Daisy touch him again. Her stomach tightened the way it does before an emergency vet visit, when you can already imagine the animal hospital lights and the invoice you'll pay without thinking, because love has never waited for a bank balance. Ethan suggested they get legal advice, just a consultation, not a fight. Something simple, like understanding liability coverage and what the law actually allowed in a case like this. Mara nodded, but the thought of attorneys and fees and homeowners' insurance paperwork made her feel older than she was. They weren't trying to break rules, they were trying not to break a family. Outside, the neighborhood had started to change. A curtain twitched across the street. A car slowed a little too much as it passed their driveway. Gordon's friendly wave had become a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. On the 6th evening, Mara stepped onto the porch to breathe cold air that smelled faintly of pine and damp soil. The sky was the color of tin. She heard Gordon's voice carry from his side of the fence, low and confident, and she didn't mean to listen until she heard the word Bobcat. "Yes," he said into his phone. "I'm sure. It's there. They're keeping it. Better handle it before it gets big." Mara's fingers went numb around the porch rail. Inside, Daisy hummed softly to Rowan through the mesh, unaware that the last day had already begun. The 7th day arrived with a sky that couldn't make up its mind. Gray light, then a hard spit of rain, then silence. The air smelled like wet asphalt and cold leaves. Mara's hands shook when she poured coffee, though she didn't drink any. The kitchen clock sounded louder than it ever had, each tick like a small hammer against her ribs. Rowan sensed it before anyone said a word. He was stronger now, his coat beginning to fluff where it had once clung. but the wildness in his eyes had sharpened too. He watched Daisy constantly, head turning whenever she moved, as if he were afraid she might disappear the way she had that first night. Daisy, for her part, kept pressing herself against the mesh panel, humming that low, steady sound like she could hold the world together with her breath. Mara laid a soft towel in the kennel and sprinkled in. A familiar scent, one of Daisy's clean blankets, still carrying the warm, milky smell of home. It felt like packing a suitcase for someone who didn't understand what leaving meant. Ethan tightened the latch and checked it twice, then again, because his hands needed something to do besides clench. When the vehicle pulled up, its tires hissed over wet gravel. 2 adults stepped out, quiet, professional, not unkind. One held a clipboard under a rain jacket. The other carried a transport crate. Their voices stayed gentle, but their words didn't bend. They spoke of regulations and intake procedures. And Mara heard the subtext that always comes with authority. We don't have time for your feelings. She knelt beside Rowan. His whiskers trembled. He made a thin, rough sound, more air than voice. Mara swallowed hard and tried to keep her tone steady, the way she did in an animal hospital when a client needed calm more than truth. "You're safe," she whispered. "You're warm. You'll be cared for." Daisy didn't bark. She didn't lunge. She just stood there, rigid, eyes fixed on the kennel, as if staring could keep it anchored to the floor. When the crate was lifted, Daisy took one step forward and then stopped, like something inside her had locked. Her ears fell back. A soft, broken whine escaped, and the sound hit Mara like a physical blow. Outside, rain speckled the kennel's plastic top, tiny, cold dots. The car door shut with a final, hollow thud. The engine started, and just like that, Rowan was gone. The house afterward felt too clean, too bright. The puppies still nursed and squirmed, but the laundry room had a hole in it, a space that didn't belong. Daisy walked to the mesh, sniffed, and then lay down with her head pressed against the empty panel. She didn't eat, she didn't drink. She didn't even sleep the way a tired mother dog should. She just stared. At the center, Mara wasn't allowed beyond the intake line. She watched through a window that reflected her own face back at her, pale and older looking. A staff member carried Rowan into a quiet room. Rowan didn't fight. He didn't spit or claw like people imagine wild animals do. He simply turned his head to the corner and curled in tight, his body making itself small, as if disappearance were the only defense left. When they offered food, he didn't look. When they spoke softly, he didn't lift his eyes. On the drive home, Ethan's knuckles stayed white on the steering wheel. Mara's phone buzzed with an email notification, an estimate from a wildlife facility, a list of costs and terms that read like a loan application. She thought, strangely, of financial planning, of how people prepare for retirement and medical bills, yet no one prepares for the price of grief. That night, Daisy's low hum was gone. In its place was a silence so thick Mara could hear the rain drip from the gutter, steady and cold, like time itself, refusing to stop the next. Morning, the sun came up like it had no idea what it had done. A thin stripe of light crossed the kitchen floor, bright and ordinary, while the house felt anything but. Daisy hadn't touched her breakfast. She lay on the laundry room mat with her chin on the threshold, eyes fixed on the empty space where Rowan's crate had been. Every so often she released a small breath that sounded almost like a question. Mara tried to keep moving. She washed bowls that were already clean. She folded towels that didn't need folding. She checked the puppies and pretended the warmth of their bodies could fill the cold gap in the room. But her mind kept returning to Rowan's turned back in that intake room, the way he had made himself small, as if the world had shut a door and he didn't know how to open it again. Around noon, her phone rang. It was a staff member from the center. The woman's voice was professional, but there was strain in it. "He's refusing food," she said. "We're monitoring closely. If it continues, we'll have to intervene." Mara's throat tightened. She thanked her, hung up, and stood in the kitchen with the phone still in her hand, feeling the weight of helplessness settle into her bones. Ethan came up behind her and rested a hand on her shoulder, warm and steady. "There has to be something we can do," he said softly. Mara looked at the security camera app on her phone, the icon she'd been avoiding. Her thumb hovered, then tapped. The footage from the storm night loaded in choppy frames. At first it was just rain streaking across the lens, the porch light flickering like a nervous eye. She scrubbed the timeline back and forth, searching for Daisy's shadow. Then she saw it. A blur near the fence line. Daisy's body low, moving fast. And in the corner of the frame, barely lit, something thin and dark, stretched tight against the ground. "Wait," Mara whispered. She zoomed in. The picture pixelated, but the shape didn't change. A wire loop, a snare line. And Daisy, gentle, tired, fresh from giving birth, lunged at it with her teeth. She bit, pulled, shook her head. The wire snapped loose and recoiled like a striking snake. Daisy didn't run. She went straight back into the brush and came out seconds later with Rowan hanging limp, then turned and sprinted for the house. Ethan leaned closer, his breath catching. The clip was short, 23 seconds from first movement to Daisy disappearing into the porch light, but it held more truth than 100 explanations. Mara's hands trembled as she saved it. For a moment she hesitated. Posting anything felt risky. There were laws, liability, public opinion, whole storms made of words. She thought about how quickly people judge, how quickly they threaten lawsuits, how the wrong kind of attention can turn into financial stress you never planned for. But then she looked at Daisy on the floor, still not eating, still waiting, and she remembered Rowan's back, turned to the corner. Ethan wrote a simple message and showed it to her before he hit post. It wasn't angry. It wasn't a call to attack anyone. It was a request for compassion and common sense, the kind older folks understand. A mother rescued a baby, and now both are falling apart. Within minutes, the numbers climbed. Comments appeared faster than Mara could race. People weren't debating politics or picking sides for fun. They were reacting to the sight of Daisy fighting a snare in the dark. Many asked the same question: who put that trap there? Lena called that evening, voice sharp with urgency. "That's a snare," she said. "Clear as day. I'm opening a report, and I'm bringing this to my supervisor." Mara stared at the screen again, heart pounding. 23 seconds had taken what felt like an impossible story and made it undeniable. And somewhere behind the rules and paperwork, a door that had been locked began to loosen. 3 days after Ethan posted the 23 seconds, Mara's phone didn't stop vibrating. Messages poured in from strangers, from neighbors she hadn't spoken to in years, even from people who said they'd worked at a wildlife rehabilitation center or an animal hospital and had seen this kind of bond before. She didn't answer most of them. She sat at the dining table with her folders spread out, photos, timestamps, notes, while the winter sun slid across the paper in a pale, slow strip. That afternoon, Lena's number flashed on the screen. "They reviewed the footage," Lena said, her voice lower than usual. "And Dr. Reed submitted his assessment. He's putting it in writing that Rowan shows imprinting behavior and that abrupt separation can cause serious harm. They're willing to talk." Mara's hands went cold and hot at the same time. Ethan squeezed her shoulder, and she could feel the steady pressure of his fingers, grounding her the way a handrail grounds you on slick steps. The meeting was held at the center, in a room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and wet coats. The officials weren't smiling, but they weren't hard either. They talked about regulations, public safety, and the fact that a bobcat is not a pet. Mara agreed, quietly, firmly. She wasn't asking to keep a wild animal like a novelty. She was asking for a humane transition. Then came the words that made her blink as if she'd misheard. "A conditional exception," the lead officer said. "Temporary custody under supervision. A secure, semi-wild enclosure plan. Scheduled evaluations. And cooperation with the investigation into illegal snares." Mara nodded so fast she felt dizzy. It sounded like paperwork and responsibility and liability coverage, the kind of thing people seek legal advice for when they're afraid one mistake could cost everything. But it also sounded like one precious thing: time. When they brought Rowan in, he didn't rush the door. He walked in stiff. Little steps, eyes wide, body held tight like a coiled spring. He looked older than he had in Mara's laundry room, not in size, but in weariness. He paused, turned his head toward the corner the way he had before, and for a moment Mara's throat closed. Then Daisy stepped forward. No barking, no chaos. Just a slow, careful approach on soft paws. Daisy's nose touched Rowan's cheek, and Daisy's breath fogged lightly in the cool room. Rowan shuddered, one full body tremble, and leaned in as if his bones had finally remembered where they belonged. Daisy gave a single, gentle lick across his brow. Rowan curled against her shoulder, pressed close, and exhaled a long, shaky breath that sounded like relief. Outside, the air tasted clean and sharp. Even the sky looked different, brighter, edged in blue. Back home, the puppies tumbled over each other, bigger now, clumsy and hungry. And Daisy finally ate. Mara watched her chew, heard the quiet crunch, and felt her own chest loosen for the first time in days. That night, Lena called again. "One more thing," she said. "The snare investigation is moving fast. They're questioning people in the area, including Gordon. Nothing I can share beyond that. But your video changed what they're looking at." Mara stood at the window, the porch light casting a warm pool on the wet grass. Rowan sat near the back door, still and alert, staring toward the dark line of trees. Daisy lay beside him, not pulling him back, just staying close. Mara realized the shock wasn't only that a gentle dog had adopted a wild bobcat. It was that love had forced the whole world, neighbors, officials, everyone watching, to look harder at what was really happening in the woods. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Before you scroll away, tell me this. Do you believe a bond like theirs could really exist? If this story touched your heart, drop a 1 in the comments so I know you're still with me. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might just remind you that sometimes the wild loves us back in ways we'll never forget.